We're continuing with the survey of the Bible, the survey of the Old Testament. We're in the book of Deuteronomy. My hope was to finish with Deuteronomy this morning. It looks like it's going to be a little bit more than I can get to, but we're nearing the end of the survey of Deuteronomy. And Deuteronomy is very central to our understanding of the Old Testament because it lays out the covenant that God established with Israel. It lays out the blessings for obedience to the covenant and the curses that come with disobedience to the covenant. And then when we continue to read through the Old Testament, we see the things that were laid out in Deuteronomy took place in history. And I talked a little bit about that last week because on Wednesday night we're in Isaiah. And really so much of what we read in Isaiah, the prophecies that the Lord revealed through Isaiah, have the Deuteronomy as the background. Because in Isaiah, the people have rebelled. They have gone to worship false gods. They were warned by God, and we read that in the book of Deuteronomy, that if they were unfaithful to the covenant, that they would be driven from the land. And so that's what we're reading in Isaiah as well. So last week, we were in chapters 27 and 28 that lays out the blessings and the curses. And those are very important chapters. I talk about the book of Deuteronomy as a whole. Well, those two chapters are very important to our understanding of the message of the Old Testament. Now, we're going to go to the chapter 29. On this outline, this is the fourth address of Moses. And we're coming to the very end of his life. And these are final instructions, exhortations, warnings that Moses gives to the people, that the Lord gives to the people through Moses. And it has to do with the renewal of the covenant, because God established the covenant with Israel at Mount Sinai back in Exodus. That generation has passed away. And now a new generation, which would be the children that passed through the Red Sea and their children, they have grown up and they're ready to enter the land. And now the Lord is having them reestablish that covenant. It's a renewal of the covenant that was made earlier. So here's an outline of this fourth address over 2 chapters. Now, each of the subpoints in this outline show up in the following slides. So if you're taking notes, this is not your last chance to take this down. But we'll start at verse 2 in chapter 29. In my judgment, that would have been the better place to put the chapter division, is after verse 1, between verses 1 and 2. And it's a call to obedience in response to the Lord's faithfulness. The Lord has been faithful to Israel. He has taken care of them. He delivered them from Egyptian slavery. He has taken care of them in spite of their unfaithfulness in the wilderness. What's the proper response to the Lord's faithfulness? And that's submission and obedience to his commands. So I'm not going to be reading through these verses, but briefly summarize. Moses reminded the people of God's mighty acts, how he delivered them from Egyptian slavery, the plagues in Egypt, the crossing of the Red Sea, the things that happened at Mount Sinai. He's reminding them of all these things, and it's pointing to the faithfulness of the Lord. And when we say the Lord, the name of God, Yahweh, the God of Israel, he has been faithful to his people. It says in verse 4, however, but to this day the Lord has not given you a heart to understand, or eyes to see, or ears to hear. Now, I don't take this as a fatalistic thing. The Lord didn't give them the heart, so they never could have. They had the opportunity to respond with faith and obedience. And there's much, when we consider ourselves, there's much we yet do not understand. We can look at just what's going on in the world today, and we wonder, well, why does God, whatever question we want to throw out there, there's much we don't understand. But understanding and spiritual insight come with faith and obedience, and the people did not respond with faith. And so that's what Moses is pointing out. God's been faithful, but you have been stubborn. And so he also reminds them that during the 40 years that they have been in the wilderness, that the Lord has sustained them. Their sandals didn't wear out, the clothes didn't wear out, they were provided with food. And it says at the end of verse 46, the purpose of this is that you might know that I am the Lord your God. The Lord was teaching them, the Lord was training them to know that their sustenance was the Lord himself. But they were slow to grasp this. And then he reminded them how the Lord had given them victory very recently at that time over the two kings that were east of the Jordan River, Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan. Now there's a typo here. I should have said king of Bashan, not king of Og. And then we get to verse 9. Because the Lord's been faithful, knowing that he's been faithful, what's the proper response? To be faithful. The Lord's been faithful, you be faithful. Keep the covenant, obey the commandments. And if you obey, the message was if you obey, then you will prosper in the land. This is verse 9. Therefore, keep the words of this covenant and do them, that you may prosper in all that you do. So this is And there's truth in that. We can never justify ourselves before God by our works, but it's just in the natural order of things that if we live in obedience to Him, there is prosperity. Now, speaking of spiritual prosperity, not necessarily material abundance, that comes with obedience to Him. Then the second part of this chapter, in verses 10 through 15, lays out the covenant establishing Israel as God's people and the Lord as their God. That's the essence of the covenant relationship. The true and living God, Yahweh, the God of Israel, he said, I have chosen you to be my people, and I will be your God. All these nations around them have their own gods, which are not truly God. But the Lord is Israel's God. So I will read through these verses, starting in verse 10. You are standing today, all of you, before the Lord your God, the heads of your tribes, your elders, and your officers, all the men of Israel, your little ones, your wives, and the sojourner who is in your camp, from the one who chops your wood to the one who draws your water, so that you may enter into the sworn covenant of the Lord your God, which the Lord your God is making with you today, that he may establish you as his people and that he may be your God, as he promised you, and as he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. So we notice everybody's there. The men, the women, the children, the foreigners who have joined with them. And they're being called to commit themselves or to enter into this covenant, which was originally established with the previous generation. But now he's calling this generation to enter into the covenant. You're about to enter the land. And once again, what is the essence of the covenant? It says in verse 13 that he may establish you today as his people and that he may be your God. That appears several times in Deuteronomy, and a statement similar to that all the way through the Bible, even into the book of Revelation. Now, we have been saved. We've been redeemed through the blood of Jesus. And the purpose of our salvation, at the very heart of it, is that we might enter into fellowship with the living God. Jesus, on the night of his betrayal, at the Last Supper, the Lord's Supper, said, this cup is the blood of the covenant. There's a covenant relationship that God is faithful, and the same thing is the essence of that new covenant, that the Lord, the God of Israel, is our God, and we are his people, and God has chosen his people, those who trust in Jesus. We are heirs to an eternal inheritance established through that covenant. Now, continuing, verse 14, It is not with you alone that I'm making this sworn covenant, but with whoever is standing here with us today before the Lord our God, and with whoever is not here with us today. This covenant was not just for the entire nation of Israel was there, but it was not just for them, but for all the future generations. And all the children born in Israel were to be reminded and taught of this covenant, that the Lord is your God and you are his people. Now, the rest of chapter 29 speaks of the curses of disobedience. And of course, we just read a very long chapter 28, that detailed the curses that would come for disobedience. Well, a similar subject's being brought up again in chapter 29. Moses, earlier he reminded them of God's mighty acts, so now he reminds them of the detestable idols that they saw in Egypt, and even worshiped themselves, we judge, because when they made the golden calf, that really was something that they had seen in Egypt, and they were imitating they were imitating the pagan worship of the Egyptians. As he warned, and it was a very strong warning, he warned that any individual, any clan, any tribe that turned away from the Lord to worship idols, it was like eating a poisonous fruit. That's where the root of bitterness, that's where that term occurs in the Old Testament. It's quoted in Hebrews also. And it has to do with the poisonous effect of worshiping false gods. That there's that warning. Then he continued to warn that if anyone worships idols and feels like he's safe, there's no God up there's going to call me to account. There's an extended description of the curse that would come upon him, but ultimately he said that the Lord said, I will